A shot of Brandy before you've taken off your coat. A capital with 1.7 million people and not one subway station. A $3 dinner that comes with more hospitality than money can buy anywhere else in Europe. And a nightlife scene built inside old war bunkers. So how does a country hold on to all of this while half of Europe insists it's still figuring itself out? Today, we find out about Serbia. The independent women of Belgrade. You'll notice them everywhere in Belgrade. A young woman in a tailored coat on the morning bus. Female doctors moving with quiet authority through hospital corridors. They carry themselves with an effortless poise that doesn't ask for attention but gets it anyway. Their presence in healthcare, technology, and education isn't a token gesture. It's a majority that shapes the entire system. But what happens, or rather what doesn't happen, in their personal lives shatters every Western assumption. The old stereotype of the Eastern European woman rushing to marry early simply doesn't survive contact with reality here. The average Serbian woman marries late, often well into her late 20s or 30s, not because she couldn't find someone, but because she was finishing a degree, building a career, proving she could stand on her own 2 feet. Walk through any faculty of medicine or engineering in Belgrade, and you'll see lecture halls filled with young women who aren't there looking for a husband. They're there to become something. The career comes first, not out of coldness, but out of a belief so deeply rooted it barely needs articulating. Independence isn't a luxury, it's dignity. Yet beneath that independence lies a weight few outsiders notice. A double burden every Serbian woman carries almost without recognition, even from herself. While she's climbing the corporate ladder or treating patients, she's also expected to remain the emotional and logistical center of her family. The Balkan household doesn't relax its expectations just because its daughter now has a master's degree. Sunday lunch at her mother's house is an unbreakable appointment. When a relative falls ill, she's the first through the door. When the family gathers for Slava, the most sacred day on the Serbian calendar, she's been in the kitchen since before dawn, even if she finished a work project the night before. The Western career woman can, to some extent, separate her professional and family life. The Serbian woman doesn't have that luxury. She exists in 2 worlds at once, pulled forward by ambition and held in place by duty, absorbing the weight of modern and traditional, professional and familial, without ever letting either side see her crack. If you spend enough time here, you'll start to sense that weight in the small moments. The sigh between phone calls, the way she checks her watch during a family dinner, the brief pause before she says yes to one more thing. It's a quiet, uncelebrated heroism that rarely gets acknowledged, least of all by the women themselves, who have long since accepted it as simply the way life works. That willingness to give everything without keeping score doesn't stop at the family door. In Serbia, the way through that door always begins with a single shot of something that burns. The ritual of Rakija. That something is Rakija, and calling it a drink misses the point entirely. In Serbia, Rakija isn't something you casually order at a bar. It's a symbol of family honor. Nearly every household boasts its own recipe, usually built around plums or pears, passed down through generations, the way other families pass down land. Some families can trace their Rakija recipe back further than most European nations can trace their current borders, and they speak about it with a reverence a French winemaker might reserve for a rare vintage. Unlike that vintage locked away in a cellar waiting for a special occasion, Rakija lives on the kitchen shelf, ready at a moment's notice. Because in this culture, you never know when someone will walk through your door, and being unprepared is unthinkable. The distillation itself is a ritual deeply tied to the land and the harvest seasons, typically overseen by family elders who treat the careful monitoring of each batch as a duty rather than a pastime. What happens when that Rakija meets a guest reveals its true meaning. The moment you cross a Serbian threshold, you're no longer a stranger, you're kin. Before you've even taken off your coat, a small glass appears in your hand. This isn't an offer. It's the opening gesture of a social contract centuries old, and refusing it is read as a personal insult to the host. When you accept, you clink glasses with everyone in the room, and here's where outsiders often stumble. You must maintain direct eye contact as your glass meets theirs. Looking away is believed to bring bad luck, or worse, to signal that your warmth is performed rather than genuine. Hosts will fiercely refuse to let you pay, treating hospitality not as politeness but as personal honor. Once that first glass is empty, the conversation almost never stays at the kitchen table. It moves down the street, into a place where the Rakija flows faster and the emotions run higher. A place that doesn't look like a bar and doesn't behave like one either. The Kafana, Serbia's living room parliament. That place is the Kafana. Forget the image of an American bar with stools and muted TVs. A Kafana is closer to an informal parliament, where football tactics, political scandals, and the deeper philosophies of life are all argued with equal conviction. You'll see 3 or 4 men at a corner table, voices rising and falling in waves. One slamming a palm flat on the wood to make a point, another leaning back with arms crossed and shaking his head slowly, a third already halfway out of his chair to emphasize whatever has just been said. None of them are angry, they're simply engaged, the way people who grew up arguing for sport can be. The Kafana functions less as a business and more as an institution, a place where opinions are forged and reputations are built not through wealth or status, but through the sharpness of your tongue and the steadiness of your argument. Sit there long enough and you'll realize that what looks like chaos to an outsider is actually a highly structured ritual of connection that has barely changed in generations. But the truest thing about the Kafana, the part that catches foreigners completely off guard, is what happens to Serbian men once the evening deepens and the Rakija has done its work. These are men who in their daily lives project toughness, who work hard, who provide, who carry the weight of family expectations on shoulders that were never given permission to slump, and yet here, in the warm amber light of a place that feels more like a living room than a commercial establishment, they sing. They sing loudly, full-throated, without embarrassment, their voices cracking on the high notes of songs their grandfathers sang before them. They weep openly when a particular melody strikes a memory they've been carrying, and they throw their arms around one another in a way that has nothing performative about it. If you come from a Western culture where male emotional expression is carefully rationed and usually requires alcohol as a social justification, the sight of grown men holding each other's faces and weeping together over a folk song can be genuinely startling. There's no irony here, no protective layer of cool detachment, no half smile that says, "I know this looks ridiculous." Just a raw and unfiltered emotional vulnerability that pours out freely because it has always been allowed to, because in this culture feeling deeply has never been a weakness to hide. Live music, the accordion and the pounding rhythms of turbofolk, ties the whole room together, fusing strangers at separate tables into one swaying singing group by midnight. The Kafana is the ultimate mirror of the Serbian soul, and this same unfiltered, wholehearted approach to life spills into the way the entire country functions, producing habits and quirks that don't exist anywhere else on the continent. The peculiar logic of everyday life. Take public transportation, one of the most baffling paradoxes you'll encounter. Belgrade, a capital of nearly 1.7 million people, offers citywide free public buses. You simply step on and ride without ever touching your wallet. It sounds like a progressive urbanist's dream, except for one catch. Belgrade has never had a subway system, not a single line. While capitals across the continent, Budapest, Prague, Bucharest, even Athens, which dug its metro through solid rock beneath ancient ruins, long ago invested in underground rail to keep their populations moving, Belgrade has relied entirely on a surface network of buses, trams, and trolleybuses that crawls through choked, narrow streets day after day. The result is a capital that often feels permanently stuck in rush hour, and the absence of a metro isn't just an inconvenience. It's a source of endless political debate, unrealized construction bids, and broken promises stretching back to the days of Yugoslavia. If you're arriving from London or Paris or Berlin, this takes genuine adjustment. You'll find yourself studying bus routes that seem to follow no discernible logic, standing at stops where the posted arrival time functions more as a polite suggestion than a schedule. Yet there's something disarmingly honest about the whole arrangement. No turnstiles, no fare inspections, just the quiet assumption that you'll ride and the city will let you. It reflects a communal trust increasingly rare in European capitals, where every public service is gated and monetized. Then there's the dining culture, which catches nearly every first-time visitor off guard with a rule so consistent it might as well be law. Nothing is free at the table. The basket of bread that appears the moment you sit down, before you've even opened the menu, that's charged. The small ceramic dish of kajmak placed alongside your grilled meats, the bowl of ajvar, the little side salad that looks for all the world like a complimentary garnish. Each one carries a price that will appear, line by line, on your receipt at the end of the meal. Even dipping sauces and condiments, things that in most countries arrive without a second thought, are tallied separately with the same precision as the main course itself. For travelers accustomed to the Western model, where bread and small starters are folded into the overall cost of dining out, this can feel jarring at first, almost as though the restaurant is itemizing every crumb. But Serbians don't see it this way at all. The underlying logic, once you settle into it, is straightforward and even refreshing. What you see is what you pay for. There are no hidden markups disguised as generosity elsewhere on the menu, and the food itself is inexpensive enough by European standards that a few hundred extra dinars for bread and relish barely registers against the total. It's a transparent approach to commerce, unapologetic and consistent, and after your third or fourth meal, you stop noticing it entirely. Smaller peculiarities surface everywhere. Popcorn sold from carts on nearly every street corner, functioning as the country's unofficial national snack. In Novi Sad, atop the Petrovaradin fortress, a clock tower's hour hand was deliberately made longer than its minute hand, so fishermen on the Danube could read the hour from the water below. But if you think the surprises end at the table, you're in for something else entirely, because what Serbians actually put on that table is a story of its own. A cuisine built for long winters. If there's one thing Serbia takes more seriously than hospitality, it's what lands on the plate. Breakfast doesn't mean a croissant standing at a counter. It means burek, a flaky, multi-layered pastry, golden and steaming, stretched and folded so many times each bite shatters into dozens of delicate sheets around a savory center of cheese, ground meat, or thin potato. You buy it by weight from bakeries open before dawn, the kind of places where the air is thick with the smell of rendered butter, and the woman behind the counter cuts your portion with a practiced hand, wrapping it in paper without a second thought. It's paired with cold, drinkable yogurt, not the thick, spoonable kind you find in Western supermarkets, but a thin, tangy liquid sipped straight from the glass. The combination sounds strange until your first bite, after which it becomes the only way you can imagine starting a morning. It isn't just breakfast, it's an act of faith in the idea that the day ahead demands fuel, and a lot of it. If burek is how Serbia wakes up, the grill is how it comes alive. The word cevapi, or cevapcici, depending on where exactly you are in the Balkans, refers to small, finger-shaped sausages made from minced meat, usually a blend of beef and pork or beef and lamb, seasoned simply with salt, pepper, and garlic, then grilled over open coals until the outside is charred and the inside stays soft and juicy. They arrive on a plate in piles of 5 or 10, tucked into a flatbread warmed on the same grill until pillowy and slightly crisp at the edges, alongside a mound of raw chopped onions that bites back with every mouthful. And then there's kajmak, a spread of clotted cream, salty and rich, with a texture somewhere between butter and sour cream that you smear across the bread before tucking the cevapi inside. If you've never eaten kajmak, it's difficult to explain what it does to grilled meat. But suffice it to say, it turns something already good into something you'll find yourself thinking about weeks later, sitting in some other country, wondering why your sandwich feels so empty. Sitting across from cevapi on most menus is pljeskavica, Serbia's answer to the hamburger, bigger, thinner, and seasoned with a depth that makes the Western version taste like it's missing something. Traditionally paired with ajvar, a roasted red pepper relish that families spend days making every autumn, roasting and peeling and cooking the peppers down into a smoky, slightly sweet paste that competes with the meat for your attention and often wins. Sarma, cabbage leaves stuffed with minced meat and rice, slow cooked until the leaf yields and the filling melts together, is the dish grandmothers make in enormous pots, enough to feed a family for days. Prebranak, a baked bean dish layered with paprika and onions, proves Serbian cooking can work magic with the humblest ingredients imaginable. Gibanica, a traditional cheese pie layered thin and baked until golden and crisp, appears alongside breakfast or as a centerpiece at family gatherings. And Karageorgieva schnitzla, a steak rolled around a rich filling, breaded and deep-fried until it crackles, is named after a Serbian prince and served with the kind of pride that tells you this isn't just food, but a small piece of national mythology sitting on your plate. This is a cuisine built for long winters and large tables surrounded by people with no intention of leaving soon. But the same land that produces all this abundance has also been the stage for some of the most consequential moments in European history. And the next chapter of Serbia's story doesn't begin with a meal, it begins with a bullet the entire world still remembers. The wound that became an identity. That bullet was fired in Sarajevo on a June morning in 1914, when a young man named Gavrilo Princip stepped from a crowd and shot Archduke Franz Ferdinand, an act that unraveled empires and dragged the world into its first great war. But to understand why that shot happened on this soil, you have to go back much further, to a field in Kosovo where the story of Serbian sacrifice was first written into the land itself. It was 1389, the Battle of Kosovo. A Serbian army, outnumbered and exhausted, stood against the advancing Ottoman forces in a confrontation no one expected them to survive, and in many ways, they didn't. Both sides lost their leaders. The battle ended in something close to a stalemate. Yet what happened on that field became something far larger than a military engagement. It became the defining wound in Serbian collective memory, a symbol of sacrifice so powerful it still lives in people's minds today as vividly as if it had happened to them personally. You'll hear it referenced in folk songs sung at family tables, in the way old men speak about honor and duty, in the quiet reverence that falls over a room when the story is retold. It's not just history, it's identity itself, the moment around which an entire people organize their understanding of who they are. Serbia would spend the next 357 years under Ottoman rule, holding on to its Orthodox faith, its Cyrillic script, and its name through centuries, when so many others simply vanished into the empire that consumed them. The scars of the 1999 NATO war still remain visible across modern Belgrade, where blown-out government buildings stand unrepaired along busy avenues, their shattered facades frozen mid-collapse as quiet reminders of a 78-day bombing campaign that reshaped the country's relationship with the West. But what's truly remarkable isn't the destruction itself, it's what Belgrade's residents have done with the spaces beneath it. Walk through certain neighborhoods after dark, descend a flight of concrete stairs, and you might find yourself stepping into what was once a civil defense shelter, a place where families once huddled in the dark listening to sirens, and discover a pulsing underground club with a DJ spinning tracks until dawn, or a dimly lit cafe where young people gather over craft beer and conversation. The bunkers built during the NATO bombings have been transformed into some of the most vibrant venues in the city, proof of a spirit that refuses to be defined by what was done to it. One can barely imagine the fear that once filled these rooms, the shaking walls, the terrible uncertainty of whether the ceiling would hold. And yet today those same rooms thump with bass and echo with laughter, the sweat on the walls now coming from dancing rather than terror. It's not just adaptation, it's defiance turned into something alive and warm, a city handing the very architecture of its destruction back to life. This refusal to surrender, this insistence on turning wreckage into celebration, is nowhere more visible than in the way Belgrade comes alive after dark, when the riverbanks light up and the whole city seems to pour into the night. 3 worlds after dark. Belgrade's nightlife isn't one thing, it's 3 distinct worlds, and if you spend enough time here, you'll drift through all of them in a single evening without meaning to. The first and most famous are the Splavovi, floating river clubs moored along the Sava and the Danube, massive barges converted into open-air temples of music and dancing that pulse with almost unbearable energy from late spring through early autumn. Walk the river path at midnight and the water itself seems to vibrate, carrying the bass through the soles of your shoes before you even reach the door. Inside, the heat of hundreds of bodies moves as one, strobe lights cut through cigarette smoke, and the music, turbo folk, electronic, pop, sometimes all at once, doesn't stop until 4 or 5 in the morning. What makes these clubs unlike anything in Western Europe isn't just that they float, but the rawness of the joy inside them. There's no curated cool here, no performative detachment. People dance like they mean it, like the night itself is something to be conquered rather than survived. And if you sit on the deck watching the Danube flow dark and silent beneath 1,000 people celebrating above it, you understand something about Belgrade that no history book can teach you. Not far from the river, Cetinska Street breathes a different life into the bones of a former brewery complex, where local youth gather in underground art spaces and raw concrete bars that feel more Berlin than Balkan. A short walk away, Skadarlija, the historic Bohemian quarter, channels romantic vintage charm through its cobblestones, where live accordion fills the narrow street while classic Serbian dining unfolds at every table. But Belgrade, for all its gravity, is not Serbia. The cultural hub of Novi Sad, 90 minutes north, offers a quieter counterpoint with its relaxed cafe culture and pastel Habsburg facades. Further along the Danube, the medieval Golubak fortress rises directly from the water's edge, its stone towers guarding the river like a gatekeeper from another age. yet none of it prepares you for the Uvak Canyon in the south, where the river carves through limestone mountains in a series of dramatic, serpentine meanders so impossibly curved they look less like a river and more like the brushstrokes of a painter who refused to draw a straight line. Standing on the cliff edge above the canyon, watching griffin vultures circle the turquoise water hundreds of meters below, you realize this is a landscape as breathtaking as anything the Alps or the Dolomites can offer, yet it remains almost entirely unknown to the crowds that flood Croatia and Montenegro every summer, one of Europe's last great hidden landscapes, quietly waiting for those willing to leave the capital behind. Whether you're dancing on a barge in Belgrade or standing above a canyon in the south, you can't help but feel Serbia is a country suspended between what it was and what it might yet become, and that uncertainty, as much as the beauty or the nightlife, is exactly what makes it impossible to look away. What ties all of this together? The women who refuse to be rescued, the Rakija that opens every door, the Kafana where strangers become family by midnight, the bunkers turned into dance floors, is a country that has never had the luxury of sitting still. Serbia doesn't perform its identity for visitors. It simply lives it, the same way it has for centuries, whether anyone is watching or not. That's precisely what makes it so hard to categorize. Ask a Serbian whether their country is Eastern or Western, past or future, wounded or thriving, and you won't get a clean answer, because the honest answer is all of it at once. The Ottoman legacy and the Habsburg cafes, the bombed-out buildings and the barges thumping with music until sunrise, the women running hospitals by day and cooking sarma by night. Serbia holds these contradictions, without apologizing for any of them. And for now, that unresolved in-between quality comes with a price tag that feels almost from another era. A full meal for the cost of a coffee elsewhere, a month's rent that wouldn't cover a week in Munich, a country where $3 still buys you a proper dinner and a warm welcome alongside it. Whether that stays true for long is impossible to say. Prices rise, word spreads, places change. But right now, in 2026, Serbia is still writing its own story, rather than performing one for outsiders, and that's a rare thing to find anywhere in Europe. If this is a country that surprised you as much as it surprised us, let us know in the comments which of Serbia's contradictions caught you most off guard. And subscribe if you want to keep discovering the places Europe hasn't figured out how to explain yet.